I want to bring greetings from California. I've been to Madrid quite a few times in the last few years. It feels like California, and I'm always very comfortable here. I also want to thank Madrid Excellence for this extraordinary Congress, the 5th Congress, and for the excellence of the staff and the leadership there in realizing your vision. So as I say, it's a great pleasure for me to be here. I also want you to know that I have blue jeans on underneath my suit, because I want to be like other Californians and our previous speaker. So I'm going to talk about research universities today, and of course I'm going to focus on American research universities, which is what I know most about. I want to convey two messages today, really the point of my talk. One is that top-level research universities compete to innovate, and they innovate to compete. That's the first point. And I'm going to provide some material, some data, some experiences with that we've had. And I will focus primarily on my own university as an example, University of California, Davis. The second point that I want to make has to do with that innovation and that competition that we find at research universities have tremendous economic impact and job creation and economic growth and development. And again, I will give you some examples of how that works. So my talk has 3 points. I only have 20 to 30 minutes, so I will be relatively brief. I want to provide an overview to you of kind of how science has evolved, or at least how scientists look at the scientific process and how that's changed in the latter part of the 20th century. The second part I want to do is I want to give you take off the black cloth over universities to give you a peek inside as to how universities such as mine create the conditions for innovation and competition. And then third, as I say, I want to provide some examples of economic development and impact that universities can have, particularly in their local regions. So I'm going to start in the classical world. I'm going to start in Alexandria, Egypt, about 300 BC. Alexandria, as you all know, had the famous library, and the Ptolemy dynasty, the kings then, decided that they needed to collect all the valuable knowledge from all over the world. So they sent people out all over to the ancient world to get the Egyptian knowledge, the Latin, the Greek, the Babylonians, the Jewish knowledge. They brought all of that and they constructed this extraordinary library in the ancient world. It took centuries to do it. So they had all this knowledge in one place. They also created a museum. They called it a museum. It's almost like a university. They had faculty there, researchers. They were given life salaries, and their room and board were paid for. It's a nice job if you can get it. They were organized into faculty. And in the 300 to 500 years of the Alexandria Library and Museum before they were destroyed, many of the famous scholars and scientists of the classical world either lived and worked there, taught there, did research there, or passed through. So you all took Euclidean geometry in high school. It was born in Alexandria. Galen, the famous physician, revolutionized the study of medicine by doing his work in comparative human anatomy. Very specific observations on the individual case and how it relates to a more general principle. And Archimedes, we all know about Archimedes. He developed, or at least developed a very close approximation to the concept of pi that we all use, of course, now all the time. And of course, he was a famous mathematician in his day who laid the foundation for calculus. Now, Archimedes was from Syracuse. It was a Greek city-state on the island of Sicily. And so he studied in Alexandria, but at some point he went back home. And he, unlike many of the other classical scholars of his day, decided that he actually needed to apply his knowledge. And so he developed war machines, among other things, to help in the defense of Syracuse against its enemies. And one of his projects, known as Archimedes' claw. And it was used actually in the defense of Syracuse against the Romans. And he used his principles of flow and motion and levers and counterweights to develop this device that would grab a ship and turn it over. And it may be the first recorded instance of intellectual property, but if so, it didn't work very well. Syracuse lost. The Romans took him over, and sadly, Archimedes was killed by a soldier who did not know who he was, even though he was told to be protected. So Archimedes, to the contrary, the scientific enterprise since those classical days in Alexandria were really less about applied knowledge than more about the pursuit of the truth. And so for scientists working in those millennia since then, and even into the 20th century, and well, even now, that there's an intrinsic value to truth. And if there is, at least historically, if there had been an applied part of it that would benefit society, it was nice, it was beneficial, but it wasn't the goal of science. And so that's known as the logic of science, and it's about the intrinsic value. Now, beginning in the 1950s and 60s, in many places, but especially in the United States, there started to be a change in that. So scientists began to see that there's some public good to be made and realized based on the kind of scholarly work and basic research that they did. There were definite applications. And so the logic of the market began really in earnest in the 1970s, where it was clear that scholars and the universities that they were part of needed to be more actively involved in taking ideas, taking technologies, and translating them for use in the marketplace. And so the logic of the market then became preeminent. One of the things that happened in the late 70s and in 1980 was kind of a signature event that woke everybody up. In the late 1970s, a professor named Herbert Boyer, who was a professor at the University of California, San Francisco, he and his colleagues did the basic science for recombinant DNA. That science ended up becoming Genentech. And Genentech was formed in the late 70s. And then in 1980, Genentech went public. There was a stock offering, an initial public offering. And overnight, Herbert Boyer, the scientist behind all this, became worth $65 million. That was a big wake-up call. There were two calls. One is that science and scientific discoveries are best gotten into the public domain through the market, and that the biggest incentive that the market can provide are patents. The other big message, of course, is that IP has real value, fundamental value. Now, and so there's a kind of a dual bottom line. You could make money and you could do good for society. And that has led to the kind of new logic of science and discovery for the public good. So any university site that you go to, and virtually any company that you hear about, that you advertises on television, they will talk about the great science they do, but how it benefits the planet, how it benefits humankind. And that's true, but it's part of a dual bottom line. That's, I think, very important for us to understand. And as the business people in this audience, you well understand and accept. The changes in the United States in the 80s were very important for the development of this market logic and science in the public good. There were some fundamental changes in U.S. law and in judicial proceedings. There was an act passed by the Congress in 1980 that's had historically very important significance. The Congress of the United States decided to make it clear that universities had the right to patent government-financed research. Before then, it wasn't entirely, it was murky. And in fact, in the act, it encourages universities and other scholars to take those products, that intellectual property, to market. A little bit later in that decade, there was some clarity around there was actually created a central court of patent appeals. And what that did was in essence, it made over time, it made patents much more valuable to individual investigators, including universities, and gave a clearer mandate about how to proceed in getting patents approved. There was a time in which there was worry about industry and universities working together in consortia around high-profile projects being subject to antitrust laws. The Congress cleared that away so that those partnerships, public-private partnerships, could proceed without worried about being sued under antitrust laws. And then our National Science Foundation, beginning in the 1980s, decided to fund big science projects, high-profile big science projects that involved a lot of partners and a lot of money. And over a 10-year period, they invested about $100 million in these projects. Now, this is all important because as I say, in the late 70s, the United States, like much of the world, was in a period of stagflation. High inflation, stagnant growth, low productivity, low growth in the productivity, high unemployment. And the U.S. government decided that that what we were suffering from in the United States was an innovation gap. And so out of that consideration, over many years and a lot of legislative battles, these and many other changes took place in the environment of U.S. research and its application. Now, my colleague Roger Geiger, who teaches at Pennsylvania State University, is a historian and a scholar of higher education, particularly research universities, has made the point, and it's very eloquently stated here, that universities, research universities, are really a treasure trove of knowledge and basic science research. And his argument, and I think it's the argument I'm making today, is that research universities, whether it's the United States or Spain or Chile or wherever, need to be brought into the mix to push science and innovation. And the top flight universities already do that. So let me give you a sense of a little bit of, again, U.S. history. This charts the growth in research funding in the United States over the last 50 or 60 years. And you can see it's pretty much a steady growth, reaching, I think this data is from 2009-10, 10-11, 9-10, I can't remember. And we get to $400 billion here. But you can see in the 80s, that period, that critical period, the slope of that curve has increased. So there's more and more. And we don't talk about expenditures now, we talk about investment in research. This is also from the same data set. Now, obviously, this is the $400 billion spent in 2010-11. And you can see that the biggest participant in this is business. It's 70% of the total. But universities and colleges are second. So in that year, it was about $55 billion spent by universities on research, both basic and applied. And that represents about 13.6, almost 14% of the total. So universities and colleges in the United States are a big player in the R&D of the United States. It's even more interesting because this shows the basic research as opposed to applied or developmental research. This is the basic research done by American colleges and universities. And what this shows is on the left are the percent of universities that are responsible for the amount of money being spent of that 55 billion. So if you look at there's about 700, 800 universities that got money to do research from the federal government. If you look at the top 30%, they're responsible for a large segment of the research, but the top 100 universities in the United States, in terms of research expenditures, account for 80% of the basic research in the United States that's funded by the government. Now, there's also another, oh, sorry, I had the wrong slide. Here's the right slide. Top 100 institutions, over 80% of the expenditures in basic research. Now, there's another piece that I want to mention. I will come back to this in the end. There's been a study done by the Brookings Institution, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C., and they've looked at patenting and patenting rates in different kinds of metropolitan areas. And their findings are pretty dramatic. They have found that where you have universities with highly ranked science departments, the rate of patenting in their local metropolitan area is significantly greater than in other areas. The same thing is true as if you have science departments that produce high-quality science graduates, the same thing. You get more patenting. And so here, again, this is from the Brookings data. On the left, you see that if you have at least one top-ranked science program, you're going to have far more significant numbers of patents than you are if you only have one, and then no well-regarded, no highly thought-of science program. Most United States patents, 60%, are developed by people living in 20 metropolitan areas, which are home to 34% of the U.S. population. My university at Davis is one of these top-flight research institutions that is in the top 100 institutions on basic research expenditures. They're in a metropolitan area. They're one of the 20 highest areas in which patents occur, and ours is really the only research university in our area, so it all comes from us. So I want to now talk about the conditions that lead to a sense of our productivity and our development around intellectual property. This is a short history of our research grants that we've gotten over the last 5 years. We're now at $750 million. This year, we're on track for 2011-12, once all the data is in, to be at 12-13, I mean, to be at almost $800 million. So you can see the growth. Despite the economic problems in the United States, research continues to be emphasized, and we've been very successful at my campus in garnering it. Over the years, this last year, actually this is from 11-12, we have 44 business startups that have come about as a result of our faculty working on basic research projects. And you can see we're very strong in biotechnology, medical science, engineering, and computing. We have had now 225 invention disclosures, again, an increase of 19% from the year before. So there's a snowball effect here. This energy and this activity is increasing in rather dramatic ways. Patents, that last year we had 59 patents, both U.S. and foreign patents that were given to us or our affiliates, and we have well over 800 patents that we manage on an ongoing basis, a 5-year basis. Material transfer agreements, these are exploding. We produce things like cell lines and chemical reagents that others use on a contractual basis to do their research, other labs, other universities. Oh, God, sorry. And 900 licensing agreements, and I'll come back to licensing agreements in a way. And then importantly, we have, the university enjoys licensing income that helps support our basic mission. And so we're at almost 14 million per year. This last year, we're up from 18% from the previous fiscal year. I have to tell you that the patent that the University of California, Davis is the most famous for, and which you market here in Spain for us in a licensing arrangement with us around the world, are strawberries. And those are the big strawberries that look so luscious, but that may not taste that great, but they travel well. Now, I want to talk again about how internally at the University of California, Davis, we stimulate and we create the conditions, what I call an ecosystem, for this extraordinary R&D and tech transfer. Now, I'm not going to I have a whole bunch here, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but let me talk about a few. We create internal competitions among our faculty. So last year, for example, the university put up $10 million, and they had faculty who compete for that money for 3-year projects that were basic research around innovation and technology, but that had the promise of interdisciplinary research and technology transfer. And they also had to have and make the case that they had the potential for sustainability once the university funding went away, and that they would get additional significant funding from state or federal sources, from foundations, or from private businesses. So, and most of the proposals had business partners who were part of them. There were 120 submissions for this. They were evaluated by an outside panel, outside the university, experts from the national academies and other places. And then ultimately 10 were awarded. So a very strong competitive process. We have other kinds of competitions which I won't go into. Graduate education is extremely important. Graduates are the workforce of today. They work in our faculty's labs. But in order to get your doctorate, as those of you who have one know, you have to do independent research. So while you're helping your faculty mentor and work on his or her project, you also have to develop something unique and different. And that pushes the field forward. It advances science and science knowledge, and they are also the workforce of tomorrow. So, and our hope is, of course, is that those graduates from UC Davis stay, especially those doctoral graduates, stay in our region. Many do, many have skills to move anywhere in the world. But many of them do stay, and they become part of our local economy. You know about research technology parks. I won't go into that. Spain has quite a lot of them. There's research partnerships with industry. There are a number of those here in Spain. They are prominent also in the United States. Industrial affiliate programs I won't go into. And then matching funding, I will say a few words about. Federal grants, like from the National Science Foundation, require a match by the university. Usually it's 10% of the overall budget. And every month, I, as a dean of the School of Education, meet with all the other deans, Dean of Mathematical and Physical Sciences, Dean of Engineering, et cetera, and if one of our faculty has a big grant, $5 million, $10 million, $2 million, whatever grant that's going in that requires a match, we, using our budgets, work with each other to create the match. So we will come up with the 10% that's needed in cooperation with our Vice Chancellor of Research, who oversees all the research done at UC Davis. So there's a participatory, a collaborative work that the deans do with each other to help each other's faculty out to get these large grants, because it's everybody's interest to have them. Now and then, of course, a big part of what happens at any top-level research university are these research centers. I will show you a few of them later very briefly. But these are faculty members who have a passion around something, whether it's water or nanotechnology or medical devices. They've spent 10, 15, 20, 30 years of their life working on it, and they've developed funding around it, and graduate students and a whole ecology to put these efforts together. And those are the drivers that within the university that allow us to compete. Now, you also have to have a campus infrastructure to support all this work. $800 million or $750 million in research funding does not come without a substantial and substantially funded infrastructure. I'll say a word about that in a minute. But then the last thing I want to talk about are living laboratories. I think more and more you will see universities using their science and their intellectual properties to develop projects on campus as a kind of showcase for their researchers, the research, and the public good that their research can do. And I will show you one quick example at UC Davis. So these are the types of organizations that we have within our Office of Research at UC Davis. This is for the entire university. We actually have an associate vice chancellor for technology management and corporate relations. That's his job to do. So he will work with all kinds of corporate entities to support the technology that we co-create together. We have an Office of Interdisciplinary Research and Strategic Initiatives. So we've just hired someone new who's actually Irish, very well connected with the EU, who has brought some new energy to this effort at our campus. We have something called Innovation Access, which is an office and staff that can help faculty who want to think about a business and a spin-off from their technology, but who also can receive calls from entrepreneurs and others and private industry who want to license our technology. So you can go to the UC Davis website, Office of Research, and you will see all the forms that you need to do if you want to license our technology, who to contact, and so forth. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to partner with us to develop the technology that's developed at the university. We're very aggressive about it. And then, of course, we have a marketing and communications group to get our message out. I feel like I'm a member of that today, but I'm not. Now, I talked to you about Innovation Access and about faculty starting a business. If you go to the Office of Research website at UC Davis, you will see this. This is a schematic for a faculty member on the steps he or she needs to start a business. And so, of course, starting a business is complicated. It's got all the regulatory stuff. You have to you have to deal with the patents, the IP. You have to deal with the university and all of that. But we've made it now easier for faculty to do that because, again, it's something we are aggressive about wanting to promote. Now, I want to talk to you about this living laboratory idea where universities make their technology accessible and available and easy to see. And so UC Davis, within the last 3 years, has created in a very public-private partnership, something called West Village, which is a living community just west of the campus across the freeway. Actually, you can walk to the campus. It's very short. That will ultimately house 3,000 students, faculty, and staff at the university at somewhat subsidized rates. And this community was built, and it's still being built. Some of it's already, that's the global plan for it. The residences for students, they're not dormitories, they're apartments, has already built. That's up and running now. I've forgotten how many, but many hundreds of suites and building and square footage are built. This was built and is being built as a zero net energy community. So, and the way we do that is by working with our campus faculty-driven research centers to try and put the latest technology, whether it's the California Lighting Technology Center, which is UC Davis, the Western Cooling Efficiency Center. These are all UC Davis. The Transportation Studies, Water Energy Efficiency, and so forth. These are all campuses that have developed IP that are actually used in the lighting and the heating and so forth of West Village. So you can go there as a visitor and get a tour, and you will see UC Davis technology making lives better and actually contributing to the planet with this basic idea around zero net energy efficiency. We also partner with a variety of other sources to make something like this happen. This is a very large project. University contracted with Carmel Partners and Urban Villages to actually build it. So the university actually put in very little money on its own, about $17 million on infrastructure that it will get back on the back end through rents that students and faculty are charged. We work with our utilities, Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, the California Public Utilities Commission, and we also have federal partners, the Department of Energy and Chevron and so on to get this. So again, a very complex environment and ecosystem for development. But again, science in the public good and a demonstrated way to show that. Now, I want to get to the last part of my talk. This is about economic impact. 2 years ago, the University of California, including my campus, contracted with a private company who does market studies and economic impact studies to look at the economic impact of UC Davis and, in fact, of the whole UC system. So this is an important number because in that year for which this was 2009-10, and it's only grown since then, in both direct, indirect, and induced economic benefit, UC Davis is responsible for $6.9 billion in the greater Sacramento region. It's an enormous impact that we have. We have created 69,000 jobs, again, either directly or indirectly through the service industry and those people who serve our students and faculty. And that, there's a lot of staff at UC Davis, but we have 1,400 faculty. So you can see the job creation that's extraordinary. We, in terms of services and good that are directly supported in the Sacramento region, we're a big buying power. It's over $1 billion. Now, there's some other statistics that I think it's worth noting. For every dollar of goods that the university generated, Northern California has benefited from an additional $1.10 to $1.40 in secondary economic activity. Again, more evidence of our ability to have an economic impact. We have 2 campuses, actually one at Davis, UC Davis at Davis, which is the main campus where our graduate programs and our undergraduate programs are. And then we have a campus in Sacramento, which is about 20 minutes away, which is where our Health Sciences Center is, our medical hospital, our medical center. We're the second largest employer in the state, in our region, behind the state of California. For every dollar the state of California invests in UC Davis, the university This is University Davis now. It returns $12 to the state economy. So it's, again, an enormous impact. Now, UC Davis is a vision, is really a leadership one in research and technology transfer. I'll let you read through these things, but there's 4 things that I think that characterize us in order to make this happen. And in fact, any leading research university has to do this. You have to resource and incentivize your faculty, your professional staff. You have to create an infrastructure. Second, you have to partner and collaborate. And certainly all morning we've heard about the importance of partnership and collaboration. And some of the previous speakers have talked about universities. We are very game and eager to do that. You have to set a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. We have entrepreneurship competitions at the University of California, Davis, actually one's called Big Bang, the Big Bang. You have to create a culture. It doesn't happen overnight. And fourth, you have to communicate to the public, and you've got to make good on your promises. You know, that we are actually doing science that benefits people and that will be a driver for change and innovation. So let me conclude. I had thought originally there would be questions, but there aren't. So hopefully we'll have some conversation at the next coffee or at the lunch. I will certainly be here. But let me conclude by saying that if it's not already clear, today's research universities need to be, should be, and in the United States very much are a part of the conditions that create economic growth, jobs, development, innovation, entrepreneurship, creativity. Research universities are not expenditures by the federal or regional governments, but as investments. And that's how we have come to look at it in the United States. They help make these changes. They help drive innovations. And I'm pleased to be here on behalf of my university at Davis. Thank you for your time.